Mani and Fariha show. This is Mani and I am Fariha.
Hello. I hope you guys are enjoying Ramadan as much as we are. And you can see I am pretty pale and I am like out of energy
and dehydrated.
Yes, pretty much. So I hope you guys are all equally. We are halfway through.
Not equally dehydrated.
We're
all doing
yes,
good.
This is all my fault. And you know what? Yes, you should hydrate yourself pretty good. And there are lots of tips, of Ramadan and how to keep yourself not just hydrated and also to optimize benefits from the benefits of Ramadan during this blessed month. So we are halfway. Almost
halfway
almost
there.
halfway.
I know, it's
exactly
amazing.
And it's amazing that alhamdulillah this whole month have been just we have been blessed with such a beautiful weather too on top of that as compared to the rest of the world, where we had 14 degrees yesterday or day before, and as rest of the countries I was doing comparison, they were like 36, 41 degrees. So yes, so we are pretty blessed.
We are indeed.
Taking advantage of that. And not just in that way, temperature-wise, but also spiritual healing, spiritual,
detoxification, mind, body,
That's
spirit level.
Absolutely. So this is the time for your alignment. Take maximum advantage of that.
Very much so. I was actually reading a quote earlier today, Mani, and it said that life is 10% what happens to us,
yes,
and 90% how we actually react to it. Exactly. Yes. So, whatever the circumstances may be, whatever the weather may be, it's up to us of how we actually react to it.
Absolutely.
Right? So we can make the best of it
during the winter
the
time, we mentioned quite a few times, that initially when I moved to Canada, I used to complain a lot about the winter and cold weather. And then I decided, if I'm not moving out of Toronto and it's my choice to stay here, yes, then I might as well,
make the most of it.
Make the most of it and choose to cherish it, because this is one of the, things that God has given us. So why not?
You know what? There's so many people around the world who are, I wish I could experience all 4 seasons, right?
Yeah.
And we have the luxury of experiencing all 4 seasons in Canada. So we are indeed very blessed. Have you taken up any winter sports?
No.
No.
My favorite sport is taking nap.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I was thinking like in the winter you may have taken something up. Oh, I actually like to make the snow angels. And just because when the snow is first there and fluffy and beautiful, how can you not?
But
you were napping. Yes, I understand completely.
I was just picturing that, visualizing that, myself doing that, but
no, it doesn't appeal to you.
I don't prefer naps.
Oh well, to each our own. And as we said, life is 10% of what actually happens to us and 90% of what we make of it. And today our guest will be speaking about patients who are going through certain situations, and we'll learn about exactly what she does, the interaction, being the mediator between patients and the drug companies. So it will be a great conversation. Also, there's so many questions that people have around this topic, because that's another thing that we often take for granted, and that's our health. And to be blessed with great health, it truly is wealth for us.
Absolutely. And not just that component, but also being in Canada, we are so blessed just to have a wonderful healthcare system. But again, just maneuvering around within the system and how the system works it's amazing that not just the system itself, but the healthcare system,
Yeah, and all the resources
that we are
and
blessed
services
with how
that are provided.
to take a full advantage of all of these resources that we have available. And we will definitely be speaking and talking about all of these some of these healthcare specialty resources today, and how you can tap into them when, God forbid, that there is a time and need.
Especially if you're in Canada.
Especially when you're in Canada. So stay tuned. We will be back shortly, and don't go anywhere.
Welcome back, everyone. So now it is time to speak with our guest. We have Liz Locust here today, who is the program manager for Patient Support Program. Yes. Welcome to our show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Welcome, Liz.
Thank you. Thank you, Annie.
So Liz, we just go way back, and Liz actually manages patient assistance programs. So we will be talking a lot about the specialty drugs and patient assistance programs. And when we actually talk about the specialty drugs and patient assistance programs, and not just the people in general, but also a lot of physician and healthcare practitioners does not know what exactly specialty drugs are. So can you just give us a little bit overview of what specialty drugs are?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Manny. So essentially, specialty drugs are not like your usual over-the-counter types of medications that you would purchase at a pharmacy. So typically, these are for medications for specialized either a disease state or an autoimmune, perhaps a disorder or a challenge that you might.
So diseases which aren't that common.
Correct, right? Or some might be more common. So,
Really?
for example, perhaps rheumatoid arthritis, or there are many different, many different therapeutic areas. Multiple sclerosis, so affecting the neurological parts of the brain. So there are different disease states, but these medications are often very expensive. And as we know, not all medications are covered in Canada, as you mentioned.
And actually, we are quite blessed in Canada to have coverage because oftentimes around the world, they're not covered at all.
Absolutely, absolutely. I completely agree. And also something's very important to know, especially depending on which province you're in, the types of coverage, it really does vary from province to province. So for example, what may be covered automatically under what we call the formulary, let's say in Ontario, would not necessarily be the case in Quebec or in Vancouver or somewhere of that nature.
And who defines the criteria of whether it's covered or not?
Right, so that would be the government, and that's definitely provincial.
So the provincial government.
Absolutely, provincial government, absolutely, yes, yeah.
So specialty drugs, when we actually speak about the specialty drugs and from our personal experiences and professional experiences, so to speak, and I also work for the specialty drugs so we come from the similar backgrounds. And these are the drugs that we can fairly speak and say that these usually are $600 and above.
Absolutely,
and they cannot be adjudicated at the pharmacy. Like you cannot just take the script to the pharmacy and say, okay, you know what, I need the medication. They have to go through the special process. And that's why these patient assistance programs are in place to assist the patients to make it easier for them.
For them to access a drug?
Exactly.
Okay. And then also, because the drug is so expensive, over $600 or whatever, are these drugs which are covered or not covered?
Okay, so great question. So there's actually different levels of coverage. So let's talk about, since we talked about provincially, there are many that are on the formularies that you can access if you have assistance with a special authorization. So you would need to enlist, typically many healthcare providers are aware of these programs once they write the prescription for you. And then they would say, here, there's a patient support program who will assist you gain coverage because they are very expensive. So that's just the initial piece to get on treatment, and then to start, and then obviously you want to stay on treatment and maintain that piece. So there's often a lot.
So you actually facilitate that process and take care of the paperwork. Yes. I have a question: that how long does it take for the patient to then access the drug?
Right, great question. So it definitely will depend on what the medication is.
And how urgently it's required.
Absolutely,
Exactly. There are a lot of factors into that.
Absolutely. So great point, actually, because there's some medications that are life-saving drugs, some that are, you may have a health challenge that maybe can wait for a couple of months, or you can start treatment a little bit later, because there are, let's be honest, side effects for many of these medications. Sometimes patients say, you know what, I can wait till after the summer. So we're approaching the summertime. Some patients would rather start in the fall because they don't want to experience these side effects or they're traveling. A lot of these medications are also injectable medications. Some are oral, but many are injectables, and many people don't want to travel with their medication.
Okay, so the injectables you actually give to the patient themselves, or do they have to go and see the healthcare practitioner to get injected?
Yes, so typically the patient support program will assist the patient and arrange for the injection training. So some of these are what we call subcutaneous, so just under the skin, and there are others that are intramuscular, so there's more involved. Certainly Manny could speak better to that piece than I can, because myself, I'm not a nurse, but definitely we would assist the patient in not only gaining the coverage, but teaching them on how to do the injection as well.
Right. So it sounds quite involved and quite a process.
Absolutely.
It is, and it's as I said, the patient assistance program it's very comprehensive, and it goes a long way to assist the patients, from step A throughout their journey, to ensure that it's the first of all, when your patient is diagnosed or the person is diagnosed, the person is already going through so much. And it's our goal during the whole process is to make it easier for them as much as possible, because really at that time that's the last thing you want to deal with is that I do not have a coverage, where do I go, what do I do, and not knowing, what the next steps. Exactly, complete all that paperwork. So all the process, the simple process is in this, and as you gave the example, Liz gave the example for rheumatoid arthritis or multiple sclerosis or psoriasis, or could be any disease state, as I oversee the prostate cancer portfolio. So in these cases, in regards to the urgency of the portfolio or the disease state, patient just simply sign the consent form and the patient is enrolled into the program. And in those cases, we take over from there. So we have extensive staff who's looking after from A to Z, and our goal is to contact the patient, only make that contact, and correct me if I'm wrong, and again, every program works differently, right? So it all depends, how much contact is needed. Right. And we only establish contacts, when it's absolutely needed. Okay. And but at the back end, we make it happen for the patient. Okay. And so reimbursement is secured for the patient. Exactly. Okay. We move the drug from point A to B to Z. Make it happen for the patient.
But there isn't any client contact, by the sounds of things, or patient contact, only in severe or urgent situations.
When absolutely as needed basis, and when, as Liz said, it depends if it's oral, injectable, or infusions. And we ensure that the patient makes to that time and place. If it's a clinic, if it's a home, if it's depending on what location the patient is getting that, we make it happen for them.
So I have another question, because you mentioned that it depends on the location. What if the person's actually in the hospital and the drug is required urgently? Is it a case of then you guys go in and fill out the paperwork, or do they have it on hand to give it to them because it's so urgent?
Absolutely. So actually, it's a bit of an involved answer, if you will. So typically, hospitals will have access to the medications that a patient would require. Okay. There are some treatments that may require the patient being, let's say, well enough. So you have to actually be able to leave the hospital, be in the home setting or in a, let's say, a chronic care facility setting. And then they would have access, let's say, for example, to the program. We would help facilitate that piece. However, to your point, typically the hospital, if it's something that's urgent or life-saving, would typically have access to those medications as well.
Okay. Well, that's been quite fascinating.
Absolutely.
And both of you have such a wealth of knowledge on this topic.
It is, and from day to day, we find it quite thrilling, in regards to, because it's quite rewarding when we, at the end of the day, it could be at the different levels, that we are able to assist the patients and make it happen for the patients. And there are some times, when I see Liz is moving around, running around in the office and doing things, making happen. And yes, there are days, when we just tap on our back and say, hey, we made it happen.
Yourself on the back. Yeah. Congratulations. Let's congratulate ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And going back to the theme, because life is 10% of actually what happens and 90% of how you react to it. And the way that you described Liz running around, it sounds like she reacts to it quite well.
Well, I hope so. We try. And Nanny as well.
Both of you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So stay tuned, and we will be back after this short brief break, and we'll be discussing a little bit more about the specialty drugs and how does the patient assistance programs work.
Hello and welcome back. We are speaking with Liz Locus, who is the program coordinator for people who require specialty drugs. And just to backtrack a little bit, what exactly defines a specialty drug?
Yeah, so specialty medications are typically medications that would not be considered over the counter. So something that would be prescribed by a physician or nurse practitioner, and typically are high cost medications for in various therapeutic areas. So we talked about, it could be neurological, it could be something that may be an immune challenge, for example, psoriasis or something of that nature.
And these are conditions which may not necessarily be infrequent either. Like it could be quite a few people who have this. So how does the funding actually take place? Is there an allotted amount by the health ministry?
Right, great question. So many of these medications are, as you said, extremely high cost, very expensive. And some provinces do have approval with a special authorization, let's say. So each province, as we talked about a little bit earlier, does have a different type of coverage. But I wouldn't say there's a specific dollar value allotted. However, what we would recommend is certainly in with your healthcare practitioner, with the program, the patient support program, we would help the patient be able to coordinate that coverage. And that looks very different. So for some patients, perhaps they would meet that, let's say there is a set criteria or health indications that the particular province would put in place in order to be able to gain coverage in that particular province. And further to that, some patients have private insurance coverage, so they can use that in conjunction with the public and the private. And then some patient support programs, if neither are available, perhaps the patient for whatever reason might not necessarily meet the criteria, or there may be other reasons that they may not be able to qualify. Yeah. Some patient support programs do offer financial assistance, some of them partial, some of them full. So definitely it can be quite daunting, especially with, as we talked about, the high cost of the medication, but there's often quite a bit of assistance out there. So we definitely would encourage, patients to speak with their healthcare practitioner, or if you know the name of the medication, certainly do your research, go online and make sure it's Canada, because in the US or otherwise it's a very different situation. The coverage would definitely vary. So, yeah.
And what constitutes the price of, or justifies the price of the drug being so high? Is it the research and development that went behind it? So if you can tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. That's a wonderful question. I would definitely agree that yes, much of it, and certainly I can't speak 100% because every medication is different. But yes, typically what it is the research and development behind it takes years and years and years. And some of these medications, they might be an enzyme, they may be
like the actual ingredients are
exactly
costly.
The actual ingredients are costly depending on what disease state it is, or what health challenge you may have, and what the consistency is of the medication. Many of them are temperature sensitive, so they need to be refrigerated at all times between 2 and 8 degrees. So exactly, some are short, some maybe a couple weeks. Others may be longer, so maybe they have a shelf life, or rather, they're still stable in a refrigerated scenario, let's say for 2 years. But to your point, they're varying depending on the medication.
And the biologics tend to seem higher cost as compared to the other specialty drugs. And biologics are the one where they are pretty much made for the human enzyme, or mimics from the proteins. They actually made from the proteins. So, and they tend to be very expensive. And when we say very expensive, pretty much I think the costs from $2,500 and above per dose, something, or sometimes or 30 days supply, depending on what form they come in, and usually they come in form of injectables. I don't think they are available in form of orals yet.
Right, and it really does. And to your point, there are some, not as many. To your point, most of them are injectables. We talked about subcutaneous, just under the skin, the intramuscular, or by infusion. There are some orals, but that's still, a lot of them are still in development. To your point.
So speaking of the reimbursement, we already touched base on the reimbursement. That's one of the key things that is offered by the patient assistance program, and that's definitely, I'm sure, when patients or the person is going through this process, that's one key thing is that being the drug so expensive, and that's what we come across is that the drug, am I going to have a coverage for the drug? And once the drug is covered and the person is relieved, and now the person goes on the drug. And the next thing which comes is that you go on the drug, how to deal with the side effects of the drug. There are other fears and, the matters. So let's touch base on the other other things that the patient assistance program can offer. So the programs that you're overseeing are offering compliance components.
Absolutely.
And a lot of other, elements are too offered through those programs. Would you be kind enough to, enlighten us? Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you, Manny. So yes, absolutely. There's certainly the financial side. It's very important to be able to get on the therapy, as you said. But then the other goal for the patient is certainly to stay on therapy. So some patients may, to your point, have, depending on the medication, may have severe side effects where they need some management, some side effect management, or even just having that support of someone saying, you know what, I understand what you're going through and let me help you through this, or perhaps providing tips and tricks and tactics on just being able to manage those side effects depending on what they are. And other programs, just to be able to, just having that reminder. Sometimes it's not even a matter of side effects, but having that support, that network to help you be able to remember to keep taking your medication, whether it's daily or weekly or monthly or whatever it may be. Some patients, they may have, let's say, needle phobia. If it's an injectable, that can be very daunting for some people.
Very
or
much
if they have,
so.
Absolutely. So there's so many different components, and it's really great. Many of these support programs do have nurses, do have have the healthcare practitioner helping to support the patient throughout their treatment journey. And some may be finite, so maybe you're done treatment in a month, 6 months, a year, 2 years. Others are chronic, like we talked about psoriasis or rheumatoid arthritis.
So that you have for a lifetime.
Absolutely.
And when you said support groups, I was actually thinking of people coming together so that you don't feel alone, that there's others going through this with you.
Absolutely. Definitely not alone. There are definitely other patients. And to your point, certainly some can be facilitated through the patient support programs. Others, certainly, I'm sure many patients are aware, you can find online. And definitely research is power, and knowledge is power, I should say. But definitely good options.
Right.
For sure.
There are a lot of peer support groups also out there where, as again, the programs that I'm working with are also that we have come across, and we are developing, are they where, in terms of, regardless where you're living in Canada, you can still get in touch with that age group that you are, and not knowing, and again, I wouldn't be comfortable talking to anybody, that I don't know face to face, right? But I may be comfortable talking about the disease state and something, where I don't know this person, and maybe online, here I have this symptoms, I have that, knowing that this person have gone through exact same, situations and disease process.
Confidentiality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So maintaining that, fine line and still sharing your experiences. So there are that kind of support,
like resources available.
Resources out there, and again, different programs offering different things, and they're quite innovative approaches. Have through the. Every program comes out to, very innovative, in their own approaches and how they want and how they like to do that. And again, depending on the disease state, and the age group that they're dealing with. And there are a lot of other factors, that come in that we have to also ensure that take it into consideration. And again, there are lots of ways to educate people and increase the awareness is through the newsletter. That's the weekly magazine or monthly, quarterly magazines where people share their stories. And
so depending on what condition you have,
exactly.
you get the relevant newsletter.
Right. And I used to manage rare genetic disorder portfolios, and I remember, writing the newsletters and collecting these stories from the patients, and it was an amazing experience. Here I have a patient from Atlantic region, sharing story, and then from BC, somebody sharing their story, who's going on the same similar experiences, and saying, what, hey, I'm here, just in case if you are experiencing something. I have been through this, and I've been through this journey. I've been on this medication for so long, and I'm fine, And if you need to,
you will be too.
You will be too.
That's great reassurance.
Again, God bless, there's so, and just for sharing that kind of, experience and their stories they could be changing many more lives out there.
Very much so. Because it's one thing for a nurse practitioner or for a doctor to come and say, you know what, you're going to be fine.
Right.
And the patient is like, well, you haven't been through it.
Exactly.
But for someone else to actually have gone through that experience and then live to tell the tale about it, it's a very different dynamic.
Very different.
But I'd like to know a little bit about you. So what got you into this profession?
Oh, what got me into this profession? Oh, that's great. It's funny because I started with the company about 12 years ago. I wasn't sure at that point sort of what I specifically wanted to do, but then I had an opportunity at a healthcare company, and I started at first in customer service, and then went on to learn about reimbursement and coverage and how it works nationally. And just working with the patients, I found it really rewarding. I just loved it. And I've worked in many different therapeutic areas like Manny, and it's definitely a lot of colorful patients, colorful areas, and just, you know what?
Like personality-wise.
Absolutely, absolutely. And every day you're always learning something new. I can tell you, there's nothing black and white, there's a lot of gray. And definitely everybody has their own unique story, and it's really rewarding. And I remember one challenging case where there was a patient who had actually multiple health issues, let's say, and was going through a very difficult...
Multiple specialty drugs?
Exactly, yes. Unfortunately, yes. Unfortunately, because, as we said, the high cost and that sort of thing, but luckily...
And the side effects, it must take a real toll on a person to be going through something like that.
Absolutely.
And multiple conditions.
Yes, and just having, to your point, the patient support program and having those extra supports, whether it's a healthcare practitioner, whether it's other peer patients who know exactly what you're going through, definitely it's heartening to know that you have that support and that you're able to get that assistance if you need it. But definitely, as I said, it's rewarding knowing you're able to help someone and help steer them hopefully in a path of better health and support as well.
So what is the most memorable patient that you've come across? Or who was?
Oh my goodness, that's a great question. Well, I would say sort of along the lines of what we were discussing, the patient that had, there's been quite a few actually, quite memorable. Some that I'm not sure I can talk on air because some more interesting, I guess, areas than others. But I will definitely say this one patient, she really, it was really difficult. She had multiple issues. She was on a couple of different biologic medications, and it was co-infected with another disease that's not, unfortunately, curable. Treatable, certainly, but not curable, and was going through a very difficult personal situation. We were really struggling with getting her coverage. There were some coverage issues with an ex-spouse, let's say, and some difficulties there. To me, the highlight was being able to get that coverage coordinated, to get that in place for her. She was in tears. I was in tears too, but I was trying to hide it. But it was so gratifying knowing that we were able to help her and help her get on her way, for sure.
So that's why I can totally imagine how rewarding it can be that when you know someone is in dire need, and then you can provide that or facilitate it in the least.
Yes, absolutely.
And those are the days I think we come across quite a few of those days, during the weekly or monthly basis. And it's just I don't know really how to explain that reward and gratification, when we go home, and it's just something really, really rewarding that when you make that happen, and for the entire team, not just for ourselves, because we know that there's so many hands, actually behind the whole play to make it happen for the patient, for that person. And I have exact kind of, almost a similar story where, and again, just happened a couple of weeks ago where the person was going through so much, at the personal front, and he needed his injection because he himself is in this terminal illness. And for me, and I was the only one among a couple of others, those who exactly knew what was happening at his personal front. And for me, it was so important for him to happen, and not having coverage in place, nothing was in place for him. But knowing that he does not have enough time, and knowing that he has, his wife passed away, and there's so much happening, so he needed it. And kudos to my team and everybody, who made it happen. Within 24 hours, he got everything in place, and literally we all were in tears. I was like, oh my God, I just owe coffee and dinner and lunch for my entire team for making that happen. Because if you see yourself at the receiving end and somebody else doing that for you, you can imagine, how
it sounds very
great
gratifying
it feels,
indeed.
that somebody else is watching out for you in that kind of time and need.
And it sounds like more than just the provision of getting the drug to them, right? It's all that emotional support, the feeling that, wow, these people, this team is behind all of this. Thank you so much, Liz, for being here with us and for explaining the whole program of how patients can get the specialty drugs and how you facilitate.
Well, thank you for having me and giving me this opportunity. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Liz. We'll definitely be seeing each other again tomorrow. So
As a matter
all
of fact,
of you, stay tuned, and we will be right back after this short break.
Wow, Mani, I learned so much about what you do and what Liz does, and it truly sounds like very rewarding of everything that you provide for the patient who is, you know, in various situations. The terminal patient that you spoke about, it really touched my heart as well. The fact that he had a terminal condition, and even those last few moments were so precious.
Absolutely. And it's just being in a healthcare profession, there's so many different ways that people in a healthcare providers, you know, can make a difference. And we, throughout our life, you know, we are making, even if we are sitting in the offices, we are still making difference in our people's lives. And that's what, you know, I love to do, and that's what I see Liz and everybody else, you know, doing, that we all love to do that on an everyday basis.
And it really shows that there's a niche for everyone, regardless of what profession is out there. And there are so many professions, you know, everyone thinks that what can I do, or what is out there for me. Just go out there and discover for yourself. I was actually meeting with Sultan earlier today, who was a guest a week or two ago, and he's putting together a great event on September the 17th, which is designed to help millennials find the best position for themselves. And not just that, also the fact that there's so many other programs that they can get involved in. They can learn French and be paid for it. They can travel around the world without spending any money. They can go and teach in various other countries as well. So whatever your passion is, go out and discover it, because as I started off with, 10% of life is what actually happens, and 90% is how you react to it. So go out there and react the best way that you can.
I would be surprised if you disappear by next week and you're backpacking and traveling, you know, somewhere, because if I see, you know,
well, you never know.
Already,
I can be unpredictable.
So watch our last week's episode, and that was with Sultan, and he just gave us a beautiful tips, you know, on how to actually backpack, and you can live your passion while you can also travel.
That's right, and we're looking forward to having him back, and, you know, after he climbs Mount Everest.
Exactly, yeah. And you know what, if you decide to do that, just take me with you.
Oh, I will, don't worry. You'll be my backpack.
We both will be doing that, and we will continue doing our show from there. We will see you next week.
She's joking, by the way.
Absolutely, we love you all.
We can't get out of the studio.
Your feedback is extremely important to us. Please give us your feedback. What topics would you like to hear, and what exactly you want to see, and we will try our best to bring you. And
there's no trying. We will do it for you, because that's our passion and purpose. And next week we have an amazing guest as well. She will be sharing her story of how kickboxing actually helped her to get to where she wants to be, and now she has a boutique studio here in the GTA area. Her name is Alka Sharma, and we look forward to her joining us next week.
And if you Google her, you would know exactly who she is.
Yes, that's right.
Yes. And we are really looking forward to have her here next week, and I'm sure you guys will enjoy her equally.
It's going to be loads of fun.
I'm sure, absolutely. I'm really looking forward to have a show with her. Absolutely. So
well, we both are.
We both are. And stay tuned, and keep watching our show. Give us your feedback, and share our show. And if you want to be on our show, share your passion with us. Let us know what actually got you where you are today, along with your passion, and align with us. And we would love to have you on our show.
Absolutely. So until next time, goodbye and God bless.
Goodbye.